In previous Smash-related crime spree runs for Payday 2, we've channeled the energies of the Triforce of Courage using bows and swords, attempted to bring back some modern honour to the vintage Belmont clan, and even went solo to brawl our way through DC using naught but our boxing prowess. It's clear that there's still plenty of untapped potential as far as these sorts of builds go in the build up to Payday 3 and all of the uncertainties currently surrounding it. And since this idea stemmed from a Smash-related Payday challenge in the first place, on top of the 10th anniversary celebration as I covered a short while ago, I figured it's time to return to the roots and settle the score with the character that started it all. With the addition of certain implements since that fateful day last year, on top of acquired knowledge off-screen, there was no doubt I'd eventually return to this format and update this particular build, this time to push myself as far as I can go in Crime Spree. As today, we'll be putting ourselves back into the role of the leader for the Phantom Thieves of Hearts, Joker from Persona 5. As ever, there are plenty of guidelines that we need to go through before we can get started on this one, so the rules of this run are as follows. Once again, we'll be doing as lengthy a crime spree run as possible, this time stepping back into the shoes of Joker in order to change the hearts of the DC police force. We'll only be utilising weapons that the character uses either in Smash or within the walls of their home series. Anything outside of those bounds is off limits. AI crewmates will be allowed back into the fold for this one, having missed out on the Punch-Out gauntlet from last time. This is crucial, as this time around they'll be playing a more pivotal role in the heists, which I'll go into later. This is a modded run, as we'll be running Vanilla HUD Plus, kill feed, useful bots and bot weapons and equipment as our primary components. Other mods will be kept to a minimum where appropriate. There's also one other mod that I'll be using for this run as well as future runs, but I'll touch upon that when we start the crime spree proper. There's also one unique rule that I will be adding to this run. Key to the idea of taking hearts, the Phantom Thieves are all about stealing treasures to do so, and the Payday gang concurs with that sentiment perfectly. So for this run, I'll be challenging myself to steal all available loot bags on any heist I roll. You may see a problem with this rule starting to emerge, but I had thought about it and laid down some key exceptions. First and foremost, any heist that offers infinite loot will not be following this guideline. There's simply not enough time in the day to ever pull that off once, let alone multiple times. This means that heists such as White Xmas, Cook-Off and Santa's Workshop will not have this requirement. Instead, I'll only secure as many bags as I'm capable of gathering before the option of escape becomes available. Second, the likes of Car Shop and the ending sequence of Prison Nightmare are not designed with securing all available loot bags in mind. At least not solo. As such, I'll only be securing as much as I can physically gather in those sorts of heists. Third, if the loot in question either requires RNG or copious amounts of puzzle elements to access them, such as the Red Diamond and Diamond heist for RNG, or the hidden stash in Ukrainian prisoner for egregious puzzles, then I won't count them as obligatory towards this rule. Any other baggable loot that's feasibly accessible from the get-go is fair game. You may cry foul at this ruling, possibly even saying this contradicts the point of the rule in the first place, but it's an exception I'd have to implement, otherwise a heist like First World Bank would be impossible under this rule set courtesy of the Overdrill Gold. And lastly, I won't be counting ATMs towards this requirement since I won't have any way to access them with my Joker build. After that it's back to standard formula, where we will only get one reroll permission selection, and we have 3 stocks to get as far as we can. Once 3 fails are on the board, that's the run over. Before we get this started, I do want to thank everyone who's subscribed over the course of this year and continues to watch my content. I can only hope that things will continue to grow both this year and the years to come as we move into the final quarter of 2023. That said, it seems as though only 12% of the people who tune into my content on the regular are actually subscribed. So if you frequently watch my content and you're not subscribed, I'd recommend doing so and turning on notifications so that you know when a new video touches down. In addition, in case you missed it from recent news, we now have a dedicated Matt Community Discord server for this channel, where you'll be able to stay in touch with myself and fellow fans, as well as get access to all sorts of events and the like. The invite link will be in the description below, for those of you who wish to become a part of the Matt community. Anyway, with all of that out of the way, it's time to get stuck in and see what mementos targets we should be looking at for our crime spree. With experience on my side, combined with better tailor pack additions, my cosplay game for this one is at least a little more on the strong side, with only the mask falling short. Persona 5's masks would honestly be a neat little crossover for the Payday franchise, but I digress. It's time to take stock of our guns for when we make the trip through Mementos, and things are a little different compared to last time. For our neutral special, we wield a gun. No surprises there. But in this run, our secondary is going to be our acting primary, serving as our main weapon of choice. And since Joker's ranged gun option is handguns, we're going to be utilizing pistols. Of the pistols available in Persona 5 and its derivatives, 3 of them are legal for this run: the M1911, the P226, and the Desert Eagle. In this case, this translates to the Crosskill, Signature 40, and the Deagle as our options for this run. Each of them are modded with concealment boosts, tactical pistol lights, and appropriate grip and slide mods. I even took the liberty of using certain skins to give the Signature 40 and the Deagle a black and red finish to refer to Persona 5's primary colour scheme. For the primary, which will be our utility weapon, we'll be rocking the GL40 grenade launcher with Viper grenades, the Pirate Barrel, a concealment boost, and the sword off stock. While Joker is not the member of his team that utilizes grenade launchers, this will instead be our stand-in for Aha and Agon, although frankly, Payday 2's poison grenade launchers make both moves look like child's play. Joker's choice of close quarters weapon is the knife, so as a result we can utilize any knife weapon as our melee, even the poisonous kunai. Personally, I decided to go with the trench knife for its speedy attack stats. For our deployable, we'll be using the first aid kits to help with survivability. Joker's appearance makes him seem more like a suit kind of guy, but we'll be rocking the lightweight ballistic vest as our armor, allowing us to have some protection while rocking high mobility. And for our perk deck, we'll be utilizing the Copycat perk deck, each with the health boosts, as well as using the Sicario perk deck ability. This gives us access to the smoke bomb, which will allow us to have an automatic 50% chance to dodge bullets while standing inside the smoke cloud. Using the smoke bomb as a smoke screen item, combined with the deck's innate ability to reflect dodge bullets back at their attackers, this will be perfect to represent Makura-Khan. If you want to have a Joker build to have someone like Futaba more involved, you could run Hacker as an equally good alternative. Our skills have a general blend of abilities useful for any situation, but we'll mostly want skills for converts, stealth, crits, and melee. In Mastermind, we have Combat Medic and Quick Fix Basic, as well as Uppers Aced in the Medic branch, and Forced Friendship as well as Joker and Partners in Crime Aced in the Controller branch. These will give us our first aid kit supplies and allow our single Jokered cop to be as good as possible, giving us a viable persona to aid us in battle. Since we're a wildcard, we can utilize whoever we can convert on the field, based on the heist we find ourselves in. In Enforcer, I picked up Resilience and Die Hard Aced, as well as Transporter, Bullseye, and Shock and Awe Basic in the Tank branch. This will give us the ability to negate the effects of flashbangs to a degree, provide additional protection for our ballistic vest, give us bag moving skills and better armor gating potential, giving us at least a partial Rebel's Guard. In Technician, I picked up Hardware Expert Basic and Drill Sergeant Aced in the Breacher branch for drill skills, which are always handy. In Ghost, I picked up Chameleon and Cleaner Basic, as well as Sixth Sense and Nimble Aced in the Shinobi branch, Duck and Cover and Parkour Basic in the Artful Dodger branch, and Second Wind and Optical Illusions Basic, as well as Low Blow and High Value Target Aced in the Silent Killer branch. Despite this not being a proper stealth build, stealth is something that should be feasible for someone like Joker to perform. Failing that, we have maximum low blow ability for the most part, having low enough concealment to have maximum crit trends throughout the crime spree, except for the Deagle under the maximum penalties for concealment, with detection falling at 26. High value target Aced will be useful as well in its own way thanks to our mods, but I'll go into that later. And in Fugitive, I picked up Equilibrium Basic and Gun Nut Aced in the Gunslinger branch, 9 Lives Aced in the Revenant branch, and Martial Arts, Pumping Iron and Bloodthirst Basic, as well as Counter-Strike Aced in the Brawler branch. Even with so few pistol skills, these make the guns we'll be using that much more effective already. On top of that, when we do have to use our knife, we'll be getting the most out of it on most enemies outside of specials. We even have the tried and true Counter-Strike Ace to act as Tetracon against those who attempt to physically attack us. Even Cloakers and Bulldozers won't get to do anything against that kind of defense. Now this is usually the point where the build lowdown comes to an end and we move on to bigger and better things. But in keeping with the Persona 5 theming, we're not quite done yet. Much like the Payday gang, the Phantom Thieves of Hearts operate as a collective unit, and like Joker, they play an integral role in a heist against their desired targets. It simply wouldn't be in the nature of this challenge run to not bring along other members of the Phantom Thieves for this journey, so I've decided to handpick 3 members that will be joining us for this challenge run as our crew AI. The first of our designated team members is going to be Ryuji, codenamed Skull. Given his general level of popularity this side of the world, I doubt that I would have been able to do this sort of thing without including him in some form. A sort of delinquent who is energetic and compassionate but not particularly respected, I've decided to have him be represented by the equally put upon Houston. As an unintended bonus, his recreated mask seems to be a combination of both his Phantom Thief mask and that of his starting persona Captain Kidd. Really going one step beyond on that one. His favoured gun type is shotguns, and seeing as how he has access to the Spas 12 in his home turf, he'll be given a familiar tool in the form of the Predator 12-gauge shotgun. The buckshot is going to be handy when it comes to those close-range firefights. Our second member of our makeshift Phantom Thieves will be Yusuke, codenamed Fox. He's an art student with an eccentric and, shall we say, unique personality, but given his love for the arts and the like, it only makes sense to have him be represented by a similar art-loving cultured gentleman in the form of Duke. The Spirit Fox mask is so perfectly designed for this job that I didn't even need to alter its design in any way, despite the fact that it's being attached to Duke's head by nothing more than string. With Yusuke's gun of choice being that of assault rifles, I decided to provide him a gun based on the M4A1, the Car 4. In order to let him get the best out of it, I provided him a Car 4 with a DMR kit and a quad-stacked magazine in order to get high damage as well as high accuracy and stability to let him mow down whoever's in his way no matter the distance. The low ammo pool is not going to be an issue at all when the AI don't have to be concerned about ammo economy. Our third and final member of our team will be a little more controversial. To provide one last piece of weapon variety in our squad, we will need a designated sniper to take out long-range threats. Kasumi, codenamed Violet from Persona 5 Royal, fits the bill perfectly. With Clover filling this role and having to use black and white sunglasses in place of a regular mask, we'll be kitting her up with a classic lever-action rifle befitting the one Kasumi uses as Violet. In this case, the Repeater 1874, kept in its original state. I should point out that with the bot weapons and equipment mod, it's possible to make these bots wield SMGs, revolvers and akimbos to allow for other members of the team to join in the fun, but I figured that this would be the best fit in terms of balance of variety. Anyway, now that we've introduced our Joker and our 3 other Phantom Thieves, it's time to jump into the metaverse and send a calling card to Commissioner Garrett. We'll take his heart and the hearts of his entire police squad by force if we have to. Having stepped away from Crime Spree for a long time since the Little Mac run, it'll feel nice to return to a more traditional looking build to tackle this challenge. And this time around, we've got a little bit more of a pleasant surprise in store. Yes, your eyes do not deceive you, we now have all of the heists in the game in Crime Spree officially. Sort of. This is actually the work of the More Heists in Crime Spree mod, which serves to add every heist in the game into the Crime Spree rotation, functioning all the way up to the unique Safe House raid and the final heist of the game, Crude Awakening. Personally, I'm a huge fan of this as I absolutely love the variety of heists the game has to offer, and this mod leaves me spoiled for choice. In addition to what this mod already offers at its core, you also have the option to prevent repetition for a certain amount of heists and also add more days into the pool, as well as other variations, such as turning Watch Dogs Day 1 and Bomb Forest into their nighttime variations. You can also add the tutorial heists, the safe house, and even holdouts into the rotation, although I'm not entirely sure why you'd want to do that, given that those would probably get borderline impossible later into the run, but it's something you can do if you're inclined. For this run and for future runs, this mod will be what I will be using as a default, just to spice things up from the previous 3 runs and preventing me from having to do Hoxton Breakout Day 1 5 times in one run, unless I explicitly want to. In addition to the heists already included, I've taken the liberty of adding Rats Day 2 at a rank of 4, Rats Day 3 at a rank of 3, Firestarter Day 3 at a rank of 5, 4 Stores at a rank of 6, Cursed Kill Room at a rank of 7, Safe House Nightmare at the maximum rank of 15, and all escape variants each at a rank of 5. Even if you're not fond of modded Crime Spree, at least appreciate that this gives us a bit of variety to work with. Anyway, enough shilling for this mod, it's time to crack on with the run proper. We had a few interesting choices on display, but I decided to head to a destination that was fairly recent compared to other heists. In this case, the run begins with the penultimate heist added, Hostile Takeover, which might as well have been Alice Rainey's palace. Now here's where I made a bit of a cock-up in terms of planning here. As you can see on the right, there are a lot of loot bags on this map, primarily the paintings stashed around the main office. This usually wouldn't be a problem in a challenge run where I have to get all loot bags, but it's made even harder with a glaring issue in the way Joker gears himself up. Since I've had to use medieval tools, throwables, or just my fists to get the job done in the past, it would have felt nice to actually depend on ballistics to get the job done for once. Or at least that's what I initially thought. You see, this build is pretty opposed to its own ideologies due to the simple fact that I cannot shoot in stealth. This means that I'm left with little more than my trench knife to get anything done quietly, lest I have to try and do stealth runs as a pacifist. Suffice to say, it's difficult to execute the phantom part of being a phantom thief when firing your only ranged weapons alerts everyone to your presence. But Joker isn't the type to give up at the first hurdle, so neither will we. Instead of using said gun to take out guards and cameras from a distance, we'll just have to sneak around the Sarah building quietly and pilfer as many paintings as we can come across, and a little magic powder on the side to boot. The main building objective locations could just reveal themselves over time as I got to work on the bag moving simulator life. I could even weaponize the fact that you don't get instantly spotted driving golf buggies that can break the sound barrier to help ferry bags to the van in groups of 4. After securing the paintings and coke, I decided to take a detour to grab the curtain keys, and convinced the marketing lady to open the case containing Alice Rainey's treasure, the Neo 2 prototype, before securing it in the van. Trust me, she won't be needing it. Finding the remaining paintings did come with its own perils, but thanks to the assistance of Futaba, the cameras wouldn't be able to spot our handiwork. It even helped that all of Alice Rainey's incriminating recordings were all kept in the same area, so that was convenient. What wasn't convenient was getting caught out by a guard on the way to securing another painting, before another guard spotted his mate's dead body drop to the floor in front of him, and costing me my last pager. This meant that I'd have to work fast to secure as much as I could before someone spotted the mess that I was leaving behind. But my strat of using the superpowered golf buggies to ferry loot eventually backfired on me when this guard saw me and promptly aborted the stealth run. I'd just have to secure the remaining paintings and the stash of wine I got with the pre-planning in loud. I'm also aware that this footage looks kind of choppy, but it's actually this very script, or at least how much of it I had written prior to the run's beginning, that was causing the lag. Don't ask me why. I don't know why Payday 2 doesn't like Microsoft Word either. It'll only be for the rest of this heist, so just bear with it. Once I had the paintings and wine secured, getting the rest of the heist done was a breeze, in spite of me crashing this golf cart by sending it down a flight of stairs. After that, the turret was the only hard part left before getting the last 2 document pieces and leaving the fairly eventful heist behind. After that shambles, I needed something a little easier. Ukrainian job being the perfect springboard to get to grips with the rule set, and since there's very few bags to secure, a fairly easy one to get done on the surface. But it seems as though this run's tradition is making my life harder in unexpected ways, as I actually got a fairly rare civvy spawn in the upper window at the back of the store who saw me dominate this guard in the alleyway. As much as I tried to get as much of this done in stealth as possible, she inevitably raised the alarm and forced me into loud again. This time I was able to get all of the loot bags in the van before it had to leave, meaning all I had to do was get the tiara from the back of the store and then wait out for the escape. Aside from this civvy disappearing off the face of the earth, there wasn't really much of note that happened with this one, quickly getting out with the tiara in hand. After that, car shot was next, which should be a walk in the park. I was able to infiltrate the place easily enough, and even got some good luck with hiding the bank manager and his lackey in his office, but then I had my latest unexpected event with pretty much everybody deciding to walk through the area where the doorway was, leaving me waiting as if I was at a red light in heavy traffic. This would only ever be a minor setback in the end though, as I got the hack done, planted the C4 and boosted a nice red Falco Genie all the way to the docks. A much more luxurious ride than the Morgana-mobile could ever hope to be, even under the wonky driving physics of Payday 2. Next up was a place I hadn't gone to in one of these crime spree runs. 4 Floors, the second day of Hotline Miami. While we wait for this to get going, I'll take this time to explain the optional side quest that I'll be setting myself for this run. While the name of the game is stealing valuables and mowing down whoever's in your way, there are a few assassination-based heists available, most of them involving a boss fight against said target when the time comes for confrontation. In this case, these will make the basis of our major Mementos targets, of whom I will attempt to take down in this run. In all, there are 7 that we'll be keeping track of. The Commissar, who we'll be facing in this very heist, Hector, the biker boss, Ernesto Sosa, Bullock, Yufu Wong, and Gabriel Santiago. That also means I'll have to go out of my way to enter their heist in the crime spree at least once in order to fight them. With that all mentioned, this run wasn't too bad, managing to come across the Bond guy with the money bags, before making my way up to the penthouse for the fiery holdout. Shout out to these 2 mobsters who both somehow managed to get down Mr. President this bulldozer, each eating a bullet intended for his faceplate. The holdout wasn't that straining, with me eventually getting to the sprinklers before rallying my gang to launch an all-out attack against the Commissar. I did play this appallingly, going down trying to get them to attack the guy, but it got the job done soon enough, with Clover getting the honour of dealing the finishing blow to our first target. After that, the hardest part is trying not to die of boredom from securing so many bags of money and powder. A hard-fought but straightforward win in the end. The garage escape that followed was easy, really. With all escapes in this mode providing just 4 bags of meth to ferry to the van, it was easy enough to get up to the top level and hold out for the rest of my crewmates to arrive. This one was never going to trouble me. A similar story can be said for the next heist, Undercover. This one can be daunting if you aren't prepared for the snipers, but with my red and black deagle in hand, I was feeling up for this one. As always, the hardest part of this heist is just to escort the taxman to the setup room as he stops every 4 feet during an assault. Luckily, this minor mementos target soon had a change of heart, with a bit of torture to help things along. So efficient was this change of heart that the hacks didn't even get interrupted once, meaning escape was inevitable in a little over 11 minutes, an easy win for the Phantom Thieves. The jewelry store that followed was essentially a joke by comparison to what we had faced in the Ukrainian job. With no upstairs civvies on hand to throw a spanner in the works, it was easy enough to subdue the entire store and loot the place of all of its bags, even taking all of the loose loot on top of that, just because I could really. What wouldn't be so simple would be the next heist, Clubhouse, the first day of Big Oil. Generally, this is a bit of a joke in stealth, being a swift and easy 12-man takedown, but only being able to use a knife without alerting everyone added a layer of complexity to what would otherwise be a free hit. But with a bit of crit luck and watching some of the biker patterns, especially this one who crucially decided to take a walk outside, I was able to systematically clear out half of the bikers on the bottom floors, even finding the safe along the way. But I figured the upper half of the bikers would prove to be a menace at some point, and something in me told me I had to get rid of them. So I did. It was a messy process, with me trying to knife the men that were trying to load me full of buckshot, before I decided to throw caution to the wind and shoot back in what would turn out to be the gun's only stealth kills of the run. To be completely honest, I thought gunfire would equal an alarm raise on this day to begin with, but apparently that's not the case. With no weapon caches to loot and me being unable to raid the ATMs in the basement, I was eventually able to get the address and clear this heist, silently. Then up next was Framing Frame Day 3, one that would prove to be even more daunting than usual since I would have to at least attempt to secure all of the gold from the Senator's vault. Not ideal, but we're all about challenge here. Despite a minor domino effect with these 2 guards, things were going remarkably well until I made a fatal discovery. The vault was once again in the epicenter, proving that this heist can flat out be cursed with specific RNG. I was phased, but I decided to push on, using the bag chute shortcut to ferry bags to the side closet in sets of 4. Then came the Herculean task of getting those bags through the epicenter into the vault without anyone spotting my handiwork. As I was moving the rest of the coke bags into the vault, 2 guards worked their way through the epicenter and eventually seemed to freeze themselves in 2 specific places. One on the balcony facing away from the vault, and after I got back down to move the gold out, the other one froze closer to the bookshelf, but with its vision crucially obscured by this pillar. This seemed to crack the final portion of this heist wide open, cutting the guard count down to 2 in essence. Until I rounded the corner towards that same closet and ran into a guard which I had to knock down. He fell down in line of sight of a camera, and that was that. One of the most promising clears of this day in a challenge run since the Belmont build, and nearly 20 minutes worth of effort completely down the drain. It was now time to hunker down and prepare for a fight. Since I'd have to drill open the door containing the server room anyway, this gave me the opportunity to scout out the power boxes, which weren't terribly far from each other in all honesty, and once the hack started, the long tug of war could begin. It's easy to see why nobody wants to do Framing Frame Day 3 loud unless they know they have a build that can make it a joke, such as with Sentries or C4 to cover the power boxes. Otherwise, it turns into a constant back and forth running simulator through a claustrophobic maze, trying to make sure the power boxes aren't being touched on as if you're playing Pac-Man in first person or something. It sucks. Using the GL40 to curse anyone who'd come near them could help, but the ammo economy for this thing meant it couldn't sustain itself for long without needing to restock. Houston and Duke, who I placed on guard duty for most of this, certainly didn't help matters by just straight up not doing their jobs. After far too much of this dreck than I would like to admit, the hack was finally done and we could finally leave. And that's when it hit me. The zip line that I had used to ferry the old wine out, yes, I included that in the loot requirement, was still there, meaning I had one last job to do before I was allowed to roll out. Thankfully, the hardest part of the heist was done by now, so all I had to do was get all 8 bags of gold ferried up there in sets of 4 before I could finally clear this heist after over 37 minutes of torture. Like hell was I going to go any further that day after what that heist had put me through. For once, Morgana's advice to just go to sleep was a welcome suggestion, as I decided to call it there for the evening. Feeling refreshed and ready to pick up where I left off, it was time to sharpen my instincts again. Transport Park was the perfect way to kickstart the day and get back into the groove. No snipers to worry about, a genset guard to act as my persona, and a firefight in an open park was the recipe for an easy clear. Helps I had money as my loot type, meaning I wouldn't be hampered too badly getting all 9 bags to the van. If anything, this heist seemed to be more of a test of the efficiency of the weapons my crew were rocking. Clover, with her repeater, was seeming to win that race more often than not. Following that, we have a bit of a first, as the Shadows making up the Washington DC police decided to take the initiative and bring the fight to the Phantom Thieves themselves for a change. Having to fend off 3 waves of cops was never going to be anything more than a training exercise though. As the waves progressed, my decision of positioning Houston on the outside to deal with the threats at the front of the safe house proved to pay off massively, as his kill count skyrocketed far beyond everyone else's after a slow start, quickly reaching triple digits. Just look at the kill feed as Houston rips through several cops in seconds with his shotgun. Brutal. This is in part due to the useful bot's capability, especially when synergizing it with high-value target aced. Useful bots allows you to modify their targeting priority to your liking without fiddling with their stats or abilities all that much so as to create 3 overpowered 9 invincible sentinels. In this case, I had their targeting based on weapon stats and had them prioritize dozers and snipers where possible. And by pointing at special enemies using my guns with high value target aced, I could mark out critical targets and effectively give my crew orders, like how I marked this bulldozer which Houston proceeded to focus down and steamroll by himself in seconds. With this Ryuji-inspired ruthless streak on board, the safe house raid was repelled with ease. By now, we were in the zone. Taking the time to bring an upgraded BFD to the fray, it was time to tackle the Golden Green Casino. The Phantom Thieves aren't strangers to casino jobs themselves, so this should be a walk in the park, even if I had an unfortunate run-in with this guy who was just in the wrong place at the wrong time. It was here that our makeshift smokescreen Makarakan combo finally justified its place in the build. It might not do much against standard grunts, but when it's capable of reflecting a sniper's bullets straight back into their faces for a one-hit kill, it always puts a smile on my face. With the BFD lowering into position, I decided to have Houston and Clover guard the 2 power boxes, with Duke being the one to defend the BFD itself. At this point, my job was little more than lobbing grenades full of curse into the power box areas and ferrying coolant tanks to and from the bathroom. Once the vault was breached, I got the others back down to ground level to enact my extraction plan. I had gone with the blimp escape for this one for one simple reason. The bag hauling I'd have to do with all the vault's money during an endless assault wave. It was here that a plan I had refined and practiced was put into motion. The crew AI and my persona would be topside defending the area around the BFD as I plundered the Golden Grins vault with complete impunity, throwing the bags up through the hole the BFD made as a result. As a quick aside, check out how much work Duke is putting in. I had quite the head start on his kill count before entering the vault, and he swiftly overtook that and then some by the time I was done in there. After getting all of the money out, I made out with the dentist's Illuminati toy box, and made my way back towards the BFD to begin extracting the loot. Clover's marksmanship certainly made it a close run, but I secured all of the money, the painting and the dentist's loot in time to give Duke a rare MVP for the heist. Safe to say, he earned that one. It was time to follow that epic up with our next major mementos target in Bullock's mansion. I spent the opening few minutes scouring the wine cellar, not because going in this way made things any easier, but it would take the strain off of the amount of loot I'd need to secure when I inevitably got caught and went loud. And caught out I was when this thug up on the upper levels saw me and decided to open fire to alert the drug baron to my crew's presence. Taking care to seek out the weapon cache and all of the coke safes along the way, I proceeded to MacGyver an explosive device using these random implements to brute force my way into the inner sanctum and the room with the mind symbol guide, even taking the liberty of releasing Bullock's shark for the inevitable retribution. After that, I made my way back and stashed the loot in the side room closest to the garage before heading back to Bullock's office and inputting the code. Except the code I put in was apparently incorrect, which was strange as I'm pretty sure the pictures matched. Well, no. Turns out I mistook the ant picture that was the actual correct piece for the spider one. With that diversion taken care of, I gathered the crew as I prepared to breach Bullock's final sanctuary. His attempts to try and delay the inevitable were weak, as I can only imagine his body was when being devoured by his own shark. With Bullock dead and his treasure tucked under our arms, we destroyed the turret with some vehicle arson and even performed a magic trick by reaching the armored van's steering wheel through a closed door and window. The final holdout to secure the remaining loot was painful, but I was able to brute force all of the remaining bags into the van and make out like a bandit. A very wounded bandit at that, but hey, at least the world was rid of another scumbag. To de-stress after that fiasco, I headed over to Nightclub, except I made the mistake of not purchasing any assets, meaning no loot truck or bad music to help make things a bit easier. Despite my desire to fail in the face of adversity, I managed to brute force my way through stealth and knifed every thug I came across, in part thanks to 2 lucky keycard drops to speed things up. This had the side effect of giving me no body bags to work with though, meaning I'd be forced to put this DJ down, lest he alerted everyone else in the club to what was going on behind the scenes. While waiting for the van, one of the last thugs remaining managed to get a shot out before his death, alerting everyone except the people outside for some reason, meaning I had to do a mad scramble to contain the situation before things went loud. Thankfully, my good management, combined with Twitch arriving in the back, meant that by the time the alarm was raised, I already had secured all of the loot and was making my way out. Note to self, check your assets next time please, Matt. Off next to Watch Dogs Day 2, where it was pretty straightforward once I got each of my crew into Overwatch positions to keep on top of the assault waves. Clover in particular made good use of this elevated position to help snipe cops from a distance. Nothing of note happened here really, the first 4 bags were secured with ease, and I decided to wait around to secure the last 2 by the boat, just for the principle of the thing really. After that, a quick visit to the Cobras was next, but the real problem here was compounded by this being the mission variant of having no meth, meaning I'd have to take the info by force, either in stealth or loud. Not the greatest prospect for the former when I'm only equipped with a knife. It is possible to do, but I botched the timing in doing so this time, forcing things loud quickly and getting me torn apart for my hubris. To add insult to injury, the safe wasn't even in the building I checked, meaning by the time I found it, it was already up in flames and I'd have to leave empty-handed. Oh well, you can't win them all. The next job on the checklist would be Brooklyn Bank, which had the promise of plenty of gold to move and a lot of deposit boxes to get access to. Thankfully, the thermal drill was the vault breaching tool of choice today, so at least that took a bit of strain off things. The only issue now, though, was that the cops now had enough DPS to start taking my crew down. But the hardest part wasn't the weight on the drill. No, the hardest part would be in the final third, in which the Brooklyn Bank I was given would expect me to move 24 bags, most of them gold bullion, to the escape van while trying to keep the assault waves off my back. At least I was able to do another Makara sniper kill. It was here that an indomitable partnership between Houston and Duke started to take shape, with the two working together to effectively control the bank's interior from the upper floor and keep a bit of pressure off me. With Clover moved outside to help keep me covered as I moved the money and gold to the van, the scope of the task I'd set myself was starting to sink in, as Clover and I were quickly starting to get overwhelmed on the snowy streets of New York. Mind you, the cops weren't faring much better themselves, seeing as how they were disappearing before my eyes in their droves. Eventually tasking Duke with assisting Clover and having Houston guard the gold before eventually joining his comrades for the final few minutes seemed to do the trick, eventually grinding out the success after almost half an hour of combat. Between the four of us, we managed to change a total of 1,187 hearts in this heist alone. What a performance by all involved. The Payday Phantom Thieves were pretty much outperforming most online crewmates, myself likely included. Following that up was a trip to Scarface Mansion. This didn't provide me with an ideal stealth situation, which I quickly botched, but what it did provide was an opportunity to take out another Mementos target in Ernesto Sosa. With his paintings trashed and his cars crashed, we were able to storm the inner sanctum and took out the security forces and turrets. After that, it was a boss fight against Ernesto himself, who, let's be honest, didn't really stand a chance, standing around as if contemplating the meaning of life before Houston got the finishing touch to take the heart of the likely still daydreaming crime lord. From here, the actual hard part of the heist begins, trying to move all of the bags of powder and money without getting sniped to oblivion, which, thanks to Clover and Houston being on point, I was able to get done before long. After that, what better place to go than the FBI offices to steal a valuable server for future Mementos targeting. I'd have to do a bit of a side quest on the way to take the cocaine and the goats, but what the feds don't know won't hurt me. In the process of cutting both wires for the alarm boxes, I did get caught out and shot at, but I had just enough time to cut the second wire and prevent the server barrier from coming down, using the pre-assault time to secure the goat and powder while Clover and Duke provided covering fire. It was basically a case of waiting on the drill before lugging the master server to the van in just under 7 minutes. We then needed to cross the country to San Francisco in order to rescue Vlad from the Triads. With the guide on hand to make sure I didn't miss any location for the T-set, which is the only mandatory loot I'm highlighting for this heist in particular, I was able to ghost my way into the warehouse and helped Vlad stave off the touch of Yaldabaoth. From there, it was just a case of trying to get as far as possible as I could in stealth, managing to steal some Triad documents, and getting caught out a couple of times heading through the ship route. In fact, I managed to make it all the way to the final firelighting objective before I lost track of my reduced pages and brought the heist to Loud. But by that point, I'd pretty much done everything, meaning all I had to do was wait on Gao Feng and secure the T-set. From here, we moved on to Lion's Den, the first day of the biker heist. This one wouldn't be easy since there were a lot of weapons and coke to secure, but I could just grind those out while waiting for the mechanic to do his thing. If anything, the real test was getting rid of the SWAT turret pestering me and my crew. Pretty much the only reason I brought the Deagle for this heist. Hell, it even got to a point that I actually ran out of bullets for my gun trying to take the thing down. But one clutch ammo pickup from Houston killing a medic nearby me gave me the final shot I needed to destroy the turret and avoid being besieged in the workshop. After that, I managed to grab the chrome skull while also pilfering some more of the loot that I left upstairs, before breaching the bunker and collecting the seat. While waiting on the mechanic to be finished, I spent the remaining time scouring the map looking for the last bag of coke I needed to secure before I could leave. I swear, I did multiple laps of this godforsaken place to try and find it, and just couldn't work out where it was hiding. Hell, I had to look up a guide for the loot locations on this heist, which I've never had to do in all of my years playing this game. Eventually, I did manage to find it in the most random of places, in this section past the boxing bag. I've played this heist a fair bit, and I've never seen any loot spawn here before. But either way, I got it secured before hopping onto Rust's bike and riding off into the sunset. Not entirely sure Joker strikes me as a Harley-Davidson rider, and me spinning out in this tunnel and needing to reverse shimmy along the wall to the escape certainly didn't help that opinion any. After a reroll, it was time for Birth of Sky. This one would present a fair bit of challenge, not the plain gauntlet though, which I could easily neutralize with my GL40. With my boots on the ground, I lit the flare for the warehouse pallet before looking around to secure the money bundles for the broken pallet to kill some time. I'll admit I got pretty peppered trying to put this thing back together, but the second and third pallets were eventually in the air after just 7 minutes. The sewer gauntlet would ordinarily pose a massive threat with its immense spawns, but my grenades were more than capable of holding off the swarms to let me reach the boat and make my way to freedom. I mean, I did get shot down before I could reach the helicopter, but I did get there in the end. From there, I was able to take a short food break before heading to Biff's tower for the Mountain Master heist, the palace of our next major target, Yufu Wang. The first part was easy enough and I was able to get into the elevator to get up to the penthouse level quietly. But once up there, I promptly got caught out by this guard who was caught in 4K being shanked by yours truly. I knew the real fight was just around the corner, not just for the gold I'd have to secure, but also the boss fight with the man himself. At the very least I had the zip line to help take the load off of securing the gold. With half of the bullion secured and the hard drive nabbed, it was time to access the thermite to breach the meeting room door and confront the Triad leader. By the way, it didn't play in this run, but Yufu's final speech before his boss fight seems like dialogue straight out of Persona 5. Just take a listen if you don't believe me.
Can you feel it? You are drawn to it, and like a moth battling a flame, you will burn and die. What comes next is destiny, unavoidable. Make your peace.
After breaching the doors and securing the tea set, it was time to get the crew in position for the rooftop confrontation to ravage Yufu Wang. The real problem here was just how resilient the guy was, with his flamethrower forcing me to keep my distance, and the GL40 effectively doing little more than tickle his giant health pool. The wild goose chase around the rooftop went on for long enough to make me threatened into running out of ammo, though thanks to another timely ammo drop, I was able to land the crucial shot needed to take the heart of the Triad leader, leading to a celebratory refill of my ammo. With the hard part over, I went back for the remaining gold and secured it by zipline before holding out for the helicopter and the eventual escape. To cap off the day's heisting, it was time to head back to where the day had begun, on Transport Park. And to be completely honest, it pretty much went the same way as the first, with me getting 9 bags of money out to the transport trucks as the rest of the crew did the heavy lifting. With that, I decided once again to call it a day, feeling good about my chances of brute forcing my way past the milestones set in the Smash Challenge video from last year, and to even challenge Link's current record, although the many pages of script still to read should be an indication on how that goes. The following day began with what was essentially a warm-up for bigger and better things with day 1 of Election Day. Suffice to say, this day is a gimme that shouldn't really be failed due to the fact that you only need to tag a truck, meaning it was a quick in and out in under 30 seconds. Easy to see why it's only got a crime spree rank of 1. In essence, it was just a way to get things prepared for the actual next major targets, the Crude Awakening heist and the Palace of Gabriel Santiago. By chance, I came across the keycard I needed for the server room in the lab, and got the right oil sample, streamlining the first part nicely. It was the pipe puzzle part that got me, as a civilian set off a quick but ruthless stealth domino effect, which ended in the helicopter spotting my handiwork and sounding the alarm. Never change, Payday. Using the pre-assault to get the pipes aligned and the pump started, I was able to get Keegan the good stuff before heading to the drilling tower for the confrontation with Shadow Gabriel. Being weak to fire and gun in that order and having next to no flunkies to worry about, it was straightforward enough to give Freddy Fazbear here the runaround and allowing my gang to wail on his health bar. The only real issue was my ammo count dropping, but the free ammo supply cabinets meant I could stay topped up for long enough to have Clover take Gabe down. It was crucial here to get the money I'd gained from pre-planning as well as the code for Rainey's office, because I'd need to go in there to get the other half of the loot during the escape. After setting the oil rig's drill off and taking a greater fall than I would have liked, I was on my way over there immediately to pilfer the remaining funds. The race to get the bags in the water made this closer than it needed to be, but I was able to get all 8 on the boat, and stood back to watch our handiwork with 30 seconds left on the detonation clock. Following that was an intermission through the garage escape once again, which effectively went the same as the first, securing all of the meth into the van quickly with little trouble, even if Duke didn't manage to pick up a single kill. Same with the re-rolled jewelry store, with me not even having to deal with a lone guard on the map as I controlled the civilians and looted the entire store of its valuables before securing them in the van. But then came the next threat. Transport Crossroads is not inherently hard, but in the part of a crime spree where enemies won't let you get away with stuff for free anymore, on top of the threat of snipers, it was not going to be the snooze fest that Park tends to be, not least because I now had 4 trucks to deal with. Once I got inside, it was here that I discovered something rather unusual. For whatever reason, the first truck I looted had 4 bags of jewelry instead of the usual 3. That left me a little mystified, especially since it went on to happen twice more after that of the remaining 3 trucks. I don't know if that's a result of rolling jewelry as the loot type or if this is just a quirk of this heist. Or the diesel engine. What I did know was that it left me having to ferry 15 bags of jewels to the van instead of the typical 12. This wasn't terrible to be honest, considering how light it is, but it did leave me wondering. I couldn't dwell on it long though. With the 210 milestone just around the corner, it was time to head to Hell's Island to ravage Murky Water and the forces of Gustavo Fring. The difficulty on this heist is more front-loaded than anything else, as surviving the initial ambush and planting the thermal paste is the hardest part of the heist, save for the end. After that, I located Bane's cell and began the countdown to release him. And it was here that another interesting thing occurred. With me positioning Clover up here to act as a vanguard for spawns in that direction, it had the curious side effect of pretty much preventing any spawns elsewhere in this area, making this part of the heist a complete joke. Things seemed to go back to normal from there when I recalled her, but by that point I was already way on the way up to the roof to meet up with the injured Bane. By positioning the gang in certain points, we were able to push through the holdout, making our way up to the helipad with just over 20 seconds to spare. That marked the previous best as Joker beaten, and now our eyes were set on toppling Link's record, but we'd have a long way to go in order to even come close. The reward, of course, was the opportunity to assassinate Hector, which I would gleefully grasp with both hands, knowing full well what happens when traitors mingle with this bunch of Phantom Thieves. Using my only pager on the camera operator to take that threat out of the occasion, I was able to cut the alarm box, leading me to my next objective. Not the panic room itself, but all of the evidence pieces and securing them as much as I could, just to take the pressure off me and Loud, especially when the snipers begin to spawn in their droves. It was slow and steady, but I was eventually able to secure 6 bundles and came across the panic room on my way to find the remaining 2, which I figured was with the FBI boss. So I detoured to the telephone pole to get the code before pouncing on the man when I had the chance, before moving him into the side closet after using the retinal scanner to let him reflect on his life choices. However, I may have overstepped on grabbing the last one I'd missed, leading me to get caught by this guard, but at the very least I had enough time to parkour my way to the van and secure one of them so that I only had one piece of evidence to secure Loud. Plus, by this point the time lock was done, even if I had to endure a boss fight with Hector upon opening the door. With me waiting on my crew to gather into the bedroom for the fight, it was time to open the panic room door and have the climactic battle with this traitorous Colombian. He had put Joker and his crew of Phantom Thieves through so much strife, and we needed to change his heart to make him answer for his sins after a long and brutal battle.
Hector was the one working with the feds.
Yeah, I was pretty surprised to see him walk out with no combat gear on and getting one-shotted for his troubles. I legit thought that if the heist went loud, he'd be decked out for a fight, no ifs, ands, or buts. But I guess, for whatever reason, the door being ready to open seemed to overwrite that, meaning Hector never got the idea with the alarm blaring out that maybe whoever was on the other side of the door wasn't likely to be friendly. I didn't have much time to reflect on that. With Hector out of the equation and me being able to secure the last bag in the chopper, this only left the biker boss as our last remaining Mementos target. Before that could be done though, an overpass escape occurred, but with the knowledge that a van was coming instead of a helicopter, I made the educated guess that it'd appear closer to the parking lot, which it did. Good stuff. Then it was time to go back to undercover to pilfer some more dirty money from the taxman. It was pretty similar to the first run, except this time the cops were able to disrupt the hack a few times. Nothing too testing in the end though. Now it was time to hit the bikers again in the clubhouse. Unlike the last effort though, I was too slow dealing with this biker before he could let a shot out, meaning that this one wouldn't be done as surprisingly silent as the last run. But with the knowledge of having no weapon caches to loot again on top of using the cameras to help mark enemies for the crew to shoot, this one wasn't going to trouble us, giving the address and clearing out in just under 6 minutes of fighting. We seem to love this particular store as now we're heading back for another Ukrainian job. By this point, full stealth wouldn't be an option anymore, as we had no more pages to fall back on, and with a guard at the front of the store, we were forced to go loud almost immediately. It's not like this is a hard heist though. Securing a Bronco cop as our persona, I was able to secure 2 bags of jewelry in the van before it had to split, and finding the tiara was child's play. Making a depth charge to the van in the middle of this assault wasn't ideal, but having this bag on my back counts as it being secured, so no harm, no foul. It was time once again for Rats Day 2, and once again I botched the attempt to silently take down the gangsters. After a minute I was able to find a safe, which turned out to hold the info we needed this time, meaning we didn't have to spend too long on this heist regardless. The next task was a bit of election rigging with breaking ballot. A bit unsavory, but sometimes to keep those undesirables from reaching office, you have to take a few drastic measures. I was able to get the hack done in stealth, only to get spotted afterwards, but by that point the heist was going to go loud anyway, meaning it was time to set the gang up in their positions. Duke in the hall outside, Houston and Clover on either end of the vault to watch for snipers. After some uneventful drilling, Duke found himself overrun in spite of my attempts to help him by launching Aegon particles everywhere. This resulted in me going down, and Duke went back down in his attempts to save me. Clover managed to save the day by helping me get back up, giving me the space to help Duke and give him some assistance, only for me to go down again for my troubles. With only 2 money bags to secure, I was able to get out in the end, even though I was grey by the time I made it there, so close call on that one. Needing another de-stress, I headed back to the nightclub and remembered to actually purchase assets this time. This gave me the room I needed to get things done, despite getting a close call with this gangster in the barrel room. Actually having the drop-off van made this a lot easier for securing the money and the coke, allowing me to slink out the same way I came in, somehow not alerting anyone on the way. But now, it was time for one of the Phantom Thieves' biggest challenges to make itself present. The White House. I might not be a Persona buff, but I think this just about outdoes Shido's Palace in terms of scope. Doing this with no pages to fall back on would prove to be nightmarish as well, but thanks to some diligence on my part, I was able to access the West Wing, and even managed to open up the Oval Office without getting caught. But trying to find the code for the safe proved to be the killer for stealth, as the guard traffic in this area led to me getting caught out and needing to start the treacherous drill objective. This is every bit the climactic battle as you might expect from the chronological final heist of the game, with murkies everywhere to try and bring down the Phantom Thieves of Hearts. But with my crew situated around the power boxes and Houston guarding the Oval Office, I was eventually able to grab the POC keycard and make a mad dash for the East Wing's library, though not before stocking up on meds and dealing with this mini-boss in the form of the Humvee turret. Now it was time for the brutal POC battle. This far into a crime spree, this was effectively a war of attrition as we made our way through the hack, with me even running out of ammo completely at one point, and then 3 of us going completely down to the murky water assault. I thought this would end up being the first failure of the run, but Houston managed to save the situation by helping me back up to set off a revive chain. Hell, with the amount of times I went down during this assault wave alone, I even went into custody to just refresh my stock. With my ammo and downs refreshed, I got to work on completing the first hack and even managed to get through the second with nowhere near as much resistance. Things did get harder again, but with no turrets spawning to make things even worse, I was eventually able to survive long enough to run into the vault and get at the pardons that would eventually liberate my crew once the spree was over. I just wish that there was a mod that turned these pardons into smash invitations. Just a suggestion, modded community. After I gathered all 24 pardons, I did actually go down again, and this time Duke was the one who saved this run, bringing Clover up just in time before he went down himself. Clover herself went clutch in bringing up Houston, and the two managed to get the rest of us back up before holding out with the remaining assault from within the POC's vault. By this point, it was all about survival, all of us throwing everything we had into just not dying. But with one well-placed Aegon at the assault's end, I found the window of opportunity, allowing me and my allies to book it out of the POC and back to the surface. The holdout we were brought into once we were back outside the White House was nothing compared to what we had just left behind. With a close call with death already on hand, I wasted no time in hacking the AA guns and booking it to Locke's helicopter with no remaining first aid kits to leave this tense heist behind us. I've never willingly done this heist in Loud, and it's easy to see why after something like that. We've gone from having next to nothing to talk about to nearly 600 words in 3.5 lengthy paragraphs detailing the closest we've been to a failure so far, such as the allure of the greatest heist of all. Obviously, needing to lie low a bit after pulling off a heist like that, it was time to get back to smaller jobs. This ended up with us procuring some meth once again in the streets, and needing to avoid being turned to paste by the snipers surrounding us. which thankfully wasn't an issue here. Then it was back to Hell's Island, just to stick it to the Murkies for giving me so much crap back at the White House. Here I discovered that the same events from before with Clover happened again. My theory is that with at least one character up in the first section and not down where the control room is, the game technically doesn't consider the gang as having fully moved into that section, and thus not being allowed to activate the enemy spawns in that area. This allowed me a nice clean pursuit of Bane once again, being able to help Locke carry his sorry ass to the helicopter with a bit more time to spare than in the first run. Somehow. Then we learned that the FBI were holding more info in their servers and somehow found another goat who was in possession of a small fortune. So we just had to drop by again and see what the fuss was about. This time I got the fortunate spawn of the keycard safe, which would cut down on the time I'd need to spend messing about in the server room. I did get caught out again with the alarm boxes, but I was able to cut both wires before the alarm went off, before ferrying the goat, the money, and then the master server to the van before the assault could introduce itself. For the final heist of the day, I chose GoBank. This is a problematic one to do in stealth, but thankfully the lack of pages to use meant that this wasn't even an option, meaning I could go loud immediately without a care in the world. I ended up having a run-in with this cloaker who somehow managed to summon his Naruto clone to crawl up to me and take me down afterwards, trying to squat on top of me as if trying to take a dump on my face before Houston shot him down in my stead. With the presence of skull dozers, one of them being present with two Saiga-wielding dozers in the bank who told me a new one, this was always going to be an uphill struggle, not least because of the snipers and the loot I'd have to get into the cage. With the assault dying out and the vault open, I got Duke to help me get the cage pieces off the road and back to the bank before I could be turned into Swiss cheese, which was partially foiled by another skull dozer being present. But I was quickly able to get the bags off the road and got the cage assembled on the roof. At least here, I could have Clover guard the cage and be the counter-strike against the many snipers that would inevitably spawn. Once inside the vault, I made my focus the many deposit boxes with the occasional smoke out or curse grenade to assist Houston and Duke. From there, it was simply just a case of trying to stay alive until I could gather all 8 money bags into the cage. After that, it was simply a case of running haphazardly through the sewers until I was able to make it out to the van. After such an eventful day of heisting, I definitely needed to call it a day, lest the White House insanity repeated itself. This day would hopefully prove pivotal in my bid to climb further up the crime spree ladder, as the first obstacle to tackle was Brooklyn 1010. A fairly straightforward heist if a bit claustrophobic at times. Thankfully, with my Aegon grenades, controlling the streets below was easy and allowed me to cross over to the next building quickly. This second part did give me a lot of grief though, with plenty of spawns and the need to get the briefcase as well as the assault rifles from inside the cage. This is the peril of high-level crime spree. Just look at how many cops were crammed into this one space to try and take the 4 of us out. It was a complete mess, not helped by the skulldozer punching out all of my blood and sending me to the floor with a single left hook. Any harder and he probably could have sent me all the way back to the Velvet Room. Luckily, with abusing the hell out of the ammo supplies, I was able to curse the snipers to death and acquire the briefcase and the 4 bags of rifles. The attempted rendezvous with Sharon was halted by me going into custody before I could make it to the elevator shaft, but with the assault down once again, I was in and out and was able to meet up with our suited friend. Using this side route, I was able to reach the final area and waited for everyone to rejoin me. Useful since I had all of New York's police presence seemingly hounding me. Twitch even decided to do me a solid and rammed through the police cars himself to speed things along. But things were just never that simple. In my bid to clear space to secure the rest of the weapons, I went down near to the van, and mirroring the Simon Belmont incident in Mexico, the gang didn't seem all that interested in getting me back, forcing me to watch Houston shoot a police car for 2 minutes before being brought back in. And in my bid to get a persona, I was downed immediately, and the crew once again decided that they didn't want to get me back up, forcing me into another 2-minute wait. Still, not too big a deal. I only had 1 more bag to secure at this point. All I'd have to do is get it and bring it to the van, and... oh. It appears to be stuck. For some reason, this bag was behind an invisible wall that I simply could not reach the bag through, likely due to a cop bringing the loot to that area to despawn it, and presumably getting interrupted by one of my friends. This wouldn't be too big an issue if it weren't for the fact that the barrier seemed to be one way and I couldn't grab it, nor could I launch it back into the playing field using my grenade launcher. Under this all loot bags rule set, this might be a run killer if I couldn't find a solution. Through experimentation, I was able to have Duke walk past this invisible barrier where the bag laid. So I had him stay there and went into custody to refill grenades, my plan being to try and blast the bag onto his back, as that would work under usual circumstances. Except, try as I might, I just couldn't get the blast velocity or angle to get this thing to snap onto his back and allow it to be carried to safety. Eventually, in a bid to try and fix things, I decided to lead myself and my crew back the way I came in hopes that the AI would grab the bag and somehow bring it back over the invisible wall, or just despawn it to free me. But it seems that they weren't that interested, instead focusing on me and my cohorts as much as they could. This infernal struggle eventually concluded with me being cut down by the SWAT turret with no more get out of jail 3 cards. That was pretty devastating. Nearly 40 minutes of strain and effort, all for nothing. The worst part of it was, this wasn't even through any fault of my own. It was instead the fault of the wonky diesel engine and the level design screwing me out of completing this heist under this rule set by making a bag impossible to re-obtain. Like hell was I about to let Brooklyn 1010 have the final word after something like that. This time, packing a deagle to focus on pure damage output over speed, this run went the same as the first. The first building was a breeze, the second building starting to cause problems. You can even see my desperation start to kick in when I begin trying to poke holes in a skulldozer using a knife, somehow coming out on top in the scuffle. With the snipers taken care of, I made my way back through the streets back to the holdout spot, this time making sure that me and my crew avoid the alleyways like the plague. At one point, I left my new shotgun-heavy SWAT to take care of things while I tended to getting 2 of my teammates up from a cloaker ambush, coming back to find that he'd somehow stapled this green SWAT through a door in the meantime. With Twitch deciding not to brute force the situation this time around, this forced my hand into moving the police cars under smoke cover, and used the last of my remaining healing supplies to get all 4 of the weapon bags into the van, and leave before any more alleyway shenanigans could occur. I needed to take a damn break after that one just for what it forced me to go through, but after managing to get some food in my system and allowing me to plan my next move, it was back to the throes of Transport Park. Thankfully, this one was nowhere near as stressful as the Brooklyn job was, getting all 9 bags of money out to the escape van, which decided to park itself right next to me and allowing me to clear this heist with little trouble. From here, it was time to make a detour to the art gallery. Duke's request, it would seem. Usually I'd take out the cameras and then focus on the paintings from there, but that wasn't even an option this time around. I'd just have to focus on getting the paintings, while trying not to get caught out with my pathetic attempts to throw paintings through painting-shaped holes. But with getting access to all holes except A from the get-go, I was able to grab 5 paintings and secure them in the van, leaving hole A to get at the last 4, which I was able to work through in just over 7 minutes, as a pacifist to boot. I decided to reward myself with a treat of the first day of election day again. While I did get spotted, I was able to tag a truck before the alarm sounded, meaning I could dash out as quickly as I dashed in. Next up was another car shop, which thankfully wasn't going to give me too much grief, although I very nearly got spotted by this guard while making a search for the manager and sending the guy back to the collective unconscious. From there though, it was easy enough to get the hack going and head down to prep the escape. Although here, I was caught out by an unprecedented conga line as nearly half of the guards in the car shop were all gathered in the stairwell, raising the alarm a little earlier than I'd like. But thankfully I had enough time to prep the C4 and got myself another Red Falco Genie for the collection. After that it was an intermission for the cafe escape, which ultimately didn't pose too much of a threat aside from the open spaces it was forcing my crew in, which served as a good warm-up before heading to the next big challenge. Hoxton Breakout Day 1. Considering Joker knows what it's like to be falsely imprisoned, this job should strike a chord with him. Freeing my stunt double from the chains of the DC police, it was time to tackle the gauntlet through the streets while trying to avoid being turned into lead-filled paste by the arrival of the minigun dozers. Thankfully, these guys didn't seem to have the enormous health pools of their death sentence counterparts, but that didn't make them any less dangerous. Thankfully, the street portion was the hardest part, meaning that from there, I could simply find the control room, hack the bollards, and marvel at Clover suspending herself a foot in the air before finishing up the heist. The next port of call was having to defend ourselves from only the second safe house raid of the run. Unlike the first one, however, the cops simply had too much DPS for the previous strategy to have any chance of working. If this was to be feasible, the gang would have to stand together. so I made sure to have all of them positioned on the top floor with the loot bag pile, and had them positioned to defend from all angles. This seemed to stop the rot and allowed the gang to get a decent kill quota in again, but the threat the minigun dozers provided certainly didn't make it easy, as Duke found out the hard way. Either way, one 16-minute slugfest later, and we were able to wipe the sweat and blood off our brows. For now, at least. We couldn't exactly vent our frustrations out on the biker boss, who for some reason was still eluding us, but we did hear that Gabe Santiago had somehow come back from the dead and his oil rig somehow repaired itself, so we should probably go ahead and do something about that. In my bid to get the right oil sample, I ended up getting caught out by this god and aborting stealth early, meaning the hardest part of the heist would have to be done all the way through in loud. I was never going to be able to do the pipe puzzle in the middle of an assault where I could get dropped at any moment. But once the key components I needed to spin showed themselves, I was more than capable of holding out until the oil was pumped, though I was sent to noir mode heading into the rematch with the Deep. Eventually, Gabe ended up succumbing to the combination of the flames and the fart gas as I set about throwing his money overboard. From there, it was simply a case of getting the sabotage drill going, sprinting past the death mobs lying in wait, and securing the rest of the cash before scooping the bags out from the sea, and watching the oil rig return to the ocean in a plume of smoke once again. Now it was time for Panic Room. This one could prove tricky with the amount of loot I'd need to secure, but I was actually fortunate enough to see the giant toothbrush spawn early on, meaning it could be secured early. And thanks to the unique mechanics of this heist, namely that an assault will never start until Chavez is located and killed, I could simply loot the place of the powder and the toothbrush with little resistance. Except I couldn't find that last bag at all. No guides could help me, and I don't think I'd have been able to find it under pressure from an assault. So I simply decided to forge on and put Chavez in the dirt. The Saw's objective was, as ever, mind-numbingly frustrating, but we got there in the end, and headed up to the roof to deal with the sniper massacre we'd be forced into. At least here, positioning the bots in strategic areas on the roof would help them deal with the snipers that spawned on their side. After the crew murdered a good portion of DC's responders, War God Bile seemed satiated enough to get the C4 down to me, meaning the real challenge here was trying not to die from the influx of beat cops that would show up. Sometimes even becoming the elusive Octo Cop by merging 4 of these beat cops into one overpowered monstrosity. After the C4 was detonated, the real tragedy occurred. One by one, the group fell until I was the last man standing. Rushing in with a smoke screen and Aegon to cover me, I tried to get everyone back up, but only got as far as Duke before a cloaker surprise attacked me and sent me to the floor too. Luckily, Duke was able to get me up to revive Houston, only to go down immediately again afterwards. From here, the assault proved to be just too much, as both Houston and Duke went down in short order. That took my second stock and crushed my spirits again. This heist could very easily have been doable if not for the final section involving so many spawns. Because of a quirk with more heists in Crime Spree that makes it selective on choosing the same mission sometimes, we were jettisoned off to deal with the Cobras one more time instead of rematching Panic Room. This time I managed to successfully perform the double takedown without raising the alarm, allowing me to waltz into the right side building with the Cobras seemingly not minding my presence at all this time. Upon watching the footage back though, it was clear that I hadn't cut big enough eye holes in my Phantom Thief mask, as I apparently missed a safe that was right next to me. Stealth eventually went the way of the pair after apparently stepping too close to the truck, which causes the Cobras to raise hell, but I managed to find another safe thinking that this one would be the one that had the info. Only to be confused when I was met with a money bag instead. Mystified, I secured it and looked for the right safe, and sure enough, I found it where I passed by earlier, now up in smoke. Oh well, at this point I couldn't really care about what happened to that stuff. After that, it was time to deal with Aftershock, which was surprisingly easy in the first phase owing to the truck spawning with just a train separating them. This meant I could have Clover and Houston defend one, with me and Duke defending the other. After that, I could move the safes through the train to safety before gathering the C4 on the overpass and making my way to the truck to load the safes. Easy part complete, it was time for the tense holdout in the construction yard where, remarkably, I avoided going down and managed to escape after 14 minutes. Surprisingly clean this late into the run. With the word that the FBI had gathered another goat in possession of drugs, I decided to go back to their offices one last time to liberate the animal and his stash. Thankfully, this time around I was able to cut both alarm boxes quietly, owing to them practically spawning right next to each other in areas of low traffic. Before tackling the server room, I'd take the time to secure the goat and the drugs, before heading back in to deal with the server room door. About half a minute before the drill was done, a guard did end up walking in to see what was happening, but I staggered the pager just long enough to buy it enough time to complete, meaning all I had to do was walk the server to the van for an easy clear. The next port of call was the second money match with the dreaded White House in what would totally not turn out to be relevant foreshadowing for events to come. And this is where an even greater tragedy occurred. The game crashed. Honestly, I'm a little surprised it's taken this long for instability to rear its ugly head in these crime spree runs, but this was not ideal. Of course, as I outlined in the link build run, crashes do not count as failures under a challenge like this, despite what the panel on the top left says. Failures would imply it was within my control, and crashes don't fall under that purview, which means this isn't the end of my suffering. So, nothing gained, plenty of continental coins lost, yet onwards we trudge. Instead, I was brought to a park escape, with me looping around the place with my spirit on a knife's edge. Trust me when I say this wasn't too bad, but as far as I'm concerned, the van took far too long getting to this park in the first place. From here, it was time to offload the deceased Hector's drugs away from the crooked shadows we were facing, made a little harder by the fact that we had to move all 12 bags instead of the typical 4. Then, because the game wasn't quite done making my life harder, the pickup decided to be by the crane, pretty much the worst place it could be in this circumstance. Still, I made the most of it, having Clover and Houston act as lookouts as I ferried the bags through the mercifully open gate and up to the truck. This holdout did put a strain on my resources, but I was eventually able to scramble my way to the armored escape before things could get too out of hand. Speaking of out of hand, the search could easily have gone this way with poorer judgment, not least because of the new presence of medic dozers. I decided to set up the group like this: Houston guarding the power box, Duke covering the hallway leading to the director's office, and Clover covering the hall just outside of the operations room. Unsurprisingly, Duke was found overrun by the overpowered foes we were facing, but I picked him back up under the cover of my Aegon grenade and made my way to the archives to pick up some evidence. After the second time getting picked up, however, I'm pleased to say that Duke pretty much went on a minor rampage, quickly rocketing his kill count up to 50 as the assault ended. With the encryption keys grabbed, it was my turn to join Duke in the suffering as a minigun dozer brought the two of us down, though thankfully I was able to take it out before he could send me to the floor fully. With Duke going down often, it was a case of me needing to continue to back him up in order to stop him from being overwhelmed, but with the forensics room as my final objective, I could do just that. He was honestly starting to find his stride with me backing him up, effectively holding the corridor down and being the first of my teammates to pop 100 kills in this heist. From here, I was able to hold out until the end of the final hack to open up the path to escape, but before grabbing the master server, I was adamant on finding the one remaining keycard that I knew was on the map somewhere. Except I just couldn't find it. This ended up being my undoing as I eventually went into custody trying to face tank another minigun dozer for Duke. Graciously though, he made sure that my sacrifice didn't go to waste as he finished him off as well as the taser that was trying to fuse with him for some reason. I then got a front row seat from the afterlife as I watched Duke slowly but surely made his kill count reach up to mine as he tore through everyone that stood before him in what I can only assume to be a cathartic rampage. With Duke having cleared the path with his ruthless streak, I decided to ferry the master server to the door and drill through it as I didn't feel like hunting for the keycard and potentially throwing this run, eventually securing it and providing Duke a well-earned MVP award for this heist. Now for a different kind of test. Heat Street. I ended up down fairly early on, although that was just so I could get a Bronco Cop persona by my side. From there, I was more than willing to race through the streets of New York with the threat of winter shields all around me as I raced up to get Roscoe. The holdout in the construction yard was pretty tense, especially with having to light 4 gas cans around Matt Roscoe's van before he finally gave up and let us ferry him. Even as a fellow Matt, I found this behavior irritating, but that would be nothing compared to what was to come. From there, it was a slow but steady climb through the streets with Roscoe in tow, before we hit a brick wall at this section at the bottom of the overpass. The assault here was simply far too intense for Roscoe to move, forcing us to stay and hold out in this area for several minutes. with me even going into custody and having to wait from there until I was released at the start of the next assault wave. Surprisingly, the push up the overpass itself wasn't too terrible by comparison, but the final holdout at the top would prove to be the deal breaker. One SWAT turret is all it took to turn a hard but doable holdout into a borderline impossible one with the assault intensity that we were forced to face, with me losing most of my downs quickly again and going back into custody. Unsurprisingly, Bile decided that this would not be an ideal place to land, as even my AI crewmates were noping out of the situation, and we were forced into the final Heat Street retreat, yes, I scripted that, back down the overpass. Thankfully, once we had picked ourselves out of the death trap that was the top of the road, it was relatively smooth sailing from there to get Roscoe and ourselves out of New York. What an arse-clenchingly frustrating experience, but if you think that was bad, you've seen nothing yet. As I alluded to before, it was time for the rematch with the White House, having eluded me and crashed my game, therefore giving me all the motivation I needed to pick a fight with 1600 Pen. It went effectively the same as the first run, being able to access the West Wing before getting caught out by guards and just about opening the Oval Office before the alarm was raised. Here, the higher power murky water units created this hallway of death where it was practically impossible to reach the power box for minutes at a time and causing a hell of a lot of problems for me, Houston, and Duke. Eventually, picking myself out of the murky water meat grinder, I was going down again and again, but refused to give up, seeing as how I could absolutely fling shields to the Shadow Realm if I so pleased. Thankfully, the drill didn't get interrupted while I was in custody, meaning I could soon grab the POC keycard and struggled my way past the Humvee turret back to the White House, making my way into the POC for the final battle ahead. All seemed to be going well as the hack got started, until the first power switch off, which immediately segged into the dreaded ceiling turret spawning and providing a major roadblock. At this high level with those things active, it would be next to impossible to get anything done. Attempting to get rid of them just wasted resources and put my teammates in unneeded jeopardy, eventually leading to me going into custody and waiting on my release again. Remarkably, Houston and Clover managed to last surprisingly long in the POC death trap, chain reviving each other in the writhing mess of angry flesh and Kevlar until Duke managed to keep the run going by withstanding an absolute onslaught to get Houston back up. Somehow this managed to last long enough to wait out the timer for me to return, with me deciding to pump as many curse rounds as I could into the veritable army surrounding them to help free my colleagues. With things quickly becoming unsustainable, I made the decision to bring myself and my crew back up to the POC entrance to hold out in there, which proved to be the better decision. With cover and pillars to block the line of sight on the turrets, it was pretty much the only safe haven we had, effectively forcing us into a last stand situation. I feel like with better weapons this would be better surmountable, but with just a pistol and the occasional poison grenade, I can only do so much with my crew by my side, eventually going into custody again and waiting until the end of the assault to get back out. With this came a window of opportunity to get the hack started up again, but the power went down again and a new assault wave began, rendering the possibility of continuing that impossible for the time being. Once that assault had ended after a painstaking hold up back up at the POC entrance, I tried making a sacrifice play to get the power on and take out one of the turrets. No dice. But it bought enough time for the rest of the first hack to complete. However, in my infinite wisdom, I tried brute forcing the start of the second hack, which saw me swiftly punished for my hubris. Until, however, Clover managed to rescue me from my predicament and I could get the hack started regardless. Worth it? I'll let you be the judge. Then I tested my luck again, switching the power back on, only to be cut down again. This time Duke was my saviour, tanking an obscene amount of bullets from the ceiling turret, and allowing me to refresh my downs by means of the revolving door of police custody. I did go down yet again in my attempt to escape the turret, but in a divine moment, my final shot before getting knocked down actually managed to destroy one of the turrets. Great! Except there was still another one that had to be dealt with, and the threat of the high-power Murkies that was still infesting the place. Taking down that turret seemed to give me an adrenaline high as I took more and more risks to keep the objective moving, and going down as a result of it under the murky water onslaught. Hell, there was a point in the stairwell here where I simply could not move, and my attempts to reunite with my friends wasted so many of my precious downs. Mercifully though, I was able to pick myself back out of the stairway of death and rejoin the group. The assault waves were trying their damn hardest at this point to mow us down, launching double minigun dozers at us with medics and medic dozers in tow to try and brute force the end of the run. But they would not be doing that. I would have that honor instead. After getting out of custody one more time, I decided to brute force getting the hack started up again, and predictably this wound up getting me killed again under the pressure of a minigun dozer and several murkies. This ended up setting off the final chain reaction of death as Duke went down trying to get me back up, leading to Clover plunging into the P.O.C. death trap to save him and, crucially, not returning back up to the P.O.C. entrance. This ended up with the two of them downed by the swarm of angry mercenaries, and although Houston was brave in surviving long enough to get Clover back up and start another chain revive, this was ultimately not enough, as Duke promptly got mowed down and marked the end of the Payday Phantom Thieves. That failure was absolutely crushing. Nearly 45 minutes of pressure, over 1,000 kills made by the crew, all up in smoke in the underbelly of the White House. My stats say it all really. 32 downs, 369 kills, over 1 million damage dealt, and nothing to show for our efforts. With that, the Joker crime spree run comes to an end at a crime spree rank of 423. Remarkably impressive, but not quite toppling Link at the top of the charts. Had I played it smarter in the second White House run, I probably would have been able to reach his milestone as Joker and even surpass it, but for the time being it seems as though crime spree is easier with a bow and arrow and a greatsword than it is with a grenade launcher and a selection of pistols. We also managed to take down a lot of our Mementos targets, although the biker boss will be remembered as the one that got away. As we close things out, it's time to bring up some numbers. Over the course of the crime spree, this 4-strong group of Phantom Thieves managed to change a staggering 16,542 hearts across all heists that we went through, success or not. To put that into perspective, that's over 3.5 times more hearts changed than there are games on the Nintendo Switch at the time of this script being written, Persona 5 itself obviously not being one of them, and almost as many words as there are in this very script I've been reading from. A special mention should go to me, funnily enough, having gotten the most kills of the group at 4,770, and having gained the most MVP ranks across successful heists in this run, though Clover was pretty close to taking both accolades. If you've made it this far, then thank you so much for watching this wild ride, and I look forward to the next run I do as a Smash character, as well as the countdown to Payday 3's release. Let me know how you feel about modded runs like this, by the way, because I do have a modded run in mind for next time, which should be fairly exciting due to the way it's set up. Until then, throw us a like if you enjoyed, subscribe for more, and I'll see you on whatever I do next, which may end up being my impressions on the Payday 3 technical beta now that I actually have my grubby little mitts on it. Until then, take care now.